recommendation that the regular meeting be suspended in the committee of the whole. Let me just see. Oh, policy. We're getting head shakes here.
You can just go directly into the committee of the whole.
Directly into the committee of the whole. Okay, perfect. So I'd like to call the committee of the whole meeting to order. So we've got a recommendation. And adoption of the agenda. So item 2 is recommendation that the agenda of the committee of the whole meeting, July 25th, 2022, be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Motion's carried. On to petition and delegations. So, for those of you present this evening, and for those of you watching via television or online, let me please explain that the committee of the whole meeting is a meeting that consists of all members of council. This meeting allows council members to deal with issues in greater detail, but is less formal than a regular council meeting. During this meeting, issues are not formally adopted, but recommendations may be made at the next regular council meeting. At that time, the recommendations of the previous committee of the whole meeting will be adopted and acted upon. Some key points to remember when making your presentation are: remember that council meetings are televised, and it is very important to introduce yourself, if applicable, name of the organization that you are representing, and speak directly in the microphone with a clear voice. When presenting, please address any comments or questions to the chair of the meeting. Keep your presentation brief. 5 minutes would be ideal, as council has several presentations on their agenda. Once you have completed your presentation, please ensure you summarize any requests or concerns. Remember that there will be no decisions made at the meeting on any requests or concerns you have made. Lastly, requests will be referred to staff for review, report and recommendation to council. Council's meetings are very full, so we'd appreciate your consideration of our time allotment. So we will go right on to petitions and delegations. We have any formal submissions, Madam Corporate Administrator? We do not.
No, we do not.
Perfect. I'd like to call any members of the public that would like to come and present to council. Welcome. Welcome back, I should say.
I was going to say surprise, but
surprise, yeah.
I'd like to ask about the mayor's schedule for the upcoming term of office. Like now he's full-time, but that was partially because of the port and things like that, and that seems to have changed. So that's the question. Is it going to revert back to what it was before? And add on to it, how are we going to pay for it? I thought before, I wasn't able to look it up, but I thought we were paying out of legacy or something like that, but or the port helped with it too. But so the question is, what's going to happen for the mayor's? Is it 5 days, or is it going to be like the city council to pay? Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Buchan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no planned changes. I would anticipate that whomever assumes the office may want to revisit the role, and there could be discussions following that, but at this point there's no planned changes.
Yeah, just for clarification of the question, because I believe you had a second part of that on the financing side of things. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it comes from our regular budget.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Going back, I thought there was a special. There was something. Could you, and you don't do it now, but could you give me where this was passed? What it was going to be? As I remember back, it was just sort of like a temporary thing right now, as opposed to something we're going to do forever type thing. So if you could
Gotcha.
find the exact reference for it, where it was passed. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can you turn this off?
Oh yeah, it should be fine there. Yeah, thanks. To call for any other members of the public that wish to speak to council. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Page. I'm not really representing anybody but myself and maybe a few other concerned citizens here locally. Locally born and raised here. I lived here all my life except for 1 year, which during that year I lived in Terrace, and I came back 3 days a week to volunteer coaching. Since graduating, I've given back to the community that have supported my youth recreation activities. I was a wrestler, and my community really supported me, and I always felt obligated to give back. This sport allowed me to grow confidence in myself, and as I developed and eventually excelled. I'm sorry that I'm reading from this. I just wrote this within the last hour. I coached wrestling for 9 years after graduating until I opened up a business that I ran for almost 15 years, which saw us host over probably 40 free events for all ages, both around town and at Shames. I have sat on both the Recreation Advisory Committee and the Business Advisory Committee. For the most part, I care more about and do more for my community than the average citizen. I have come to some of you here before at the local city council meeting, one time before, to ask for your help. Last time I was here speaking to you, it was to advocate for the need of weekend evening activities to distract kids from the influences to drink and do drugs. At the time, my business was suffering from multiple broken windows a year. Majority of the broken windows were random acts of violence from youth who were just walking by. No theft, just random acts of violence at the wee hours of the morning. After discussing with the community many issues and community problems, it was determined that the problem was way larger than kids breaking windows. It was a community problem that involved alcohol, drugs, abuse, and violence, and the everlasting effects it has, especially on these kids. These kids were just basically taking out their frustrations around town. I decided to try to work with the city to try to improve things in hopes that a little difference may help in the long run. With the help of council, city staff, and the rec department, we created free activity nights at the arena during the time frames that the ice was out. It basically turned into indoor skateboarding because that's what I had to offer, and attempts to bring in other volunteers proved difficult for me to attract. We tried doing half arena ball hockey, and we had a musician come out with his guitar to try to teach kids, but the kids just ended up skateboarding. Skateboarding was the main draw, and at our peak of the free indoor skateboarding, we would average about 25 kids a night or visitors a night, and I really believe that keeping kids active on Friday and Saturday nights between 7 and 9 will help distract kids from making drinking plans for the night. I believe 7 to 9 is the prime time for making party plans. After 2 hours of recreation, a lot of these kids were tired and ended up just going home. I really wish that when I was a teen, this was offered, a healthy environment to progress at fun activities. The free indoor skateboarding lasted a few years, but eventually was switched to free youth nights once a month, while the indoor skateboarding went to a paid drop-in program with paid supervision. I come to you now because I'm trying to continue the skateboarding program. The rec center and myself were unable to find someone to supervise this program. I decided to offer to supervise the program myself this year. I basically own all the drop-in features and have built features for, and I care about the program's continuation, so it only made sense as I've been fortunate enough to work day shifts at the port for some time now. After communicating with Heidi, I was excited to start, but upon trying to hire me, Heidi informed me of the new vaccine hiring policy and informed me that I would not be able to run this or any program.
I apologize
sorry,
for
sorry,
interrupting.
sorry,
I
Mike.
think the speaker is getting into a labor relations matter, which would be an in-camera matter. So if he could finish his presentation, but not address council on things that are labor relations, that would be appreciated.
Okay, I'm not really sure what I am supposed to say and not say here now, but I will continue on with my presentation.
Sorry for clarification.
I would
Yeah.
recommend that any discussion about the city's administration's vaccine policy is for new employees is a matter that is in camera. So it's not for public discussion in an open meeting.
Okay, well, I will speak and nobody really has to respond, but I would like to have some sort of communication with you in the future.
I would, yes, I think having submitting a letter to the administration, that'd be just fine, and if we need to have a meeting, we can certainly do that.
Okay, so I'll continue on here. And inform me that I would not be able to run this or any program with the city or even be considered for employment
I think that's still into labor relations.
at all with the city. This hurt as I've given a lot of time over the last 25 plus years to be shut out like this.
I think that if the speaker could actually take this offline and we can deal with this more appropriately outside of this meeting.
Sorry, Councillor Cunningham.
Can we, at the next council meeting when it's closed, invite Mr. Page to that meeting so he can discuss this with us?
The council can consider that and make an invitation at that time if they want, but I don't think that should be discussed now.
Could I finish my presentation?
Sorry, what the city manager's getting at is just like when it comes to labor relations or anything on legal matters and things regarding the municipality, that we don't have these kind of discussions publicly. So what we're looking at, and also what Councillor Cunningham is proposing, is that further like invitation to have this discussion in the future. And in camera, what he means by that is in a closed session that's regarding labor matters. Because there's usually 3 topics that we try to highlight that are done in camera and off public discussion. And this would be one of those.
Looking at my notes here, what I have to say is probably against what you guys want to hear on camera right now.
Yeah, and it's and just for clarification's sake, it's not that folks are not wanting to hear this. It's just when legal parameters around labor relations and things like that. These are things that we can't discuss publicly.
So you guys can choose not to discuss it, but can I make my presentation?
I would recommend that not happen. I think that we should have a meeting, and if the council wants to invite them to have a discussion in camera, then the council can make that.
Could do so. Yeah. Thank you.
I also feel like I'm not speaking just for myself, because if you take away the, we all pay the same taxes here. We all pay the same rates. And if you take away the opportunity for employment of anybody, that takes away their opportunity to feed their children, house their children.
Yes, muted.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to invite any other members of the public to discuss matters with council. So I'll call that invitation a second time. Then a third and final time.
I'm just going to leave my papers with you guys, and I'm going
Okay.
to take off.
Yeah, of course.
I
Thank you.
printed
Yeah,
off
can you bring those over to-
copies, but in order to get here before 7, I wasn't able to.
Just a single copy. That's fine. Yeah, over to our corporate administrator. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, and like we said, we'd love to have a discussion in the future. They're just off camera.
I will contact one of y'all.
Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you, and sorry about that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any reports, questions, and inquiries of members of council? So I'd like to recommend a motion to adjourn and reconvene the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Rendell, seconded by Councillor 80. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, first recommendation is called the regular council meeting to order. So moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Okay. On to the adoption of the agenda. So recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of July 25th, 2022 be adopted as presented with the addition of item 4A, award presentation of city matter council item 4P, report from the fire chief regarding Prince Rupert Fire Department response to medical incidents, and item 4Q, report from the corporate administrator regarding the Prince Rupert Golf Club request for support. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Motion's carried. On to our minutes. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of special council meeting of June 27th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the regular meeting of June 25th, 2022 be adopted. Moved by Councillor 80, second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, on to reports and resolutions. Item 4A, award presentation from the city manager to council.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. City Manager.
I have the pleasure I had the pleasure of attending the annual national conference for the Canadian Institute of Planners, combined with the Planning Institute of BC's conference, about 2 weeks ago. And at that meeting, the city of Prince Rupert was given an award, a planning award, award of planning excellence for its work on the official community plan and Vision 2030. It was a combination of those two works that were presented to the Planning Institute for consideration in their adjudication, and they decided to award an award to the City of Prince Rupert, along with Larry Beasley and Associates and Sisyphus Studio, for the work that was done on both of those planning processes. This is something I think the city can take great pride in, as well as all of the participants and partners that were involved in both of those efforts. Certainly with Vision 2030, that was a partnership involving Redesign Rupert, Community Futures, the City of Prince Rupert, the Port Authority, DP World, Ridley Terminals, and Raymont. A significant partnership in terms of running that process, with some 3,000 participations in that process over a couple of years. And that the participation in the official community plan was extensive, with city staff and the public, with another almost 1,000 inputs from the public. So it's something that I think the city can take pride in, and it's something that I'm happy to bring to you, to give to you for the mayor, for the city.
On behalf of the city. Perfect. Thank you.
There you are.
Awesome. Thank you kindly. There we go. So this is going up on my wall. Hey, guys. Not my. There we go. Awesome. Thank you very much. Any discussion on the award or any other pieces? Councillor Randall?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that's great news for our community, and I'd like to congratulate staff and everybody else involved in that presentation. So thank you.
Councillor Niche?
I believe that was your first job, Mr. Buchan, for us, was it not?
It was the first and very long job.
Well, great job by everyone involved, including all community members, and yeah, it's awesome to see that we were recognized for that.
Yeah, I just want to echo a lot of the notions that have been touched on. Just to thank our staff and just everyone involved, and Dr. Buchan as well, which I thought it was ironic you presenting it to us as council, but I thought that was pretty nice. But again, just, yeah, a huge thank you to everyone involved, stakeholders, as well as community members that came in for their output and input as well. Okay, on to the next. Item 4B, report from the communications manager regarding approval of contract to receive transportation funding. Hello.
Hi there. So essentially, this report is fairly short. It's just intended to allow us to receive $9,000 in grant funds towards the active transportation component of our master transportation plan, which means that the active transportation component of our master transportation plan is now completely funded because we also got a grant from UBCM. So just some positive news, and hoping that you'll say yes to accepting money.
Yes, yeah. No. Yeah, we're not about that here. I don't know what... Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. So we've got a motion and recommendation to accept some money. So a recommendation that council support by resolution the city's contract with the Federal Ministry of Intergovernmental Affairs, Infrastructure and Communities to receive $9,000 in funds towards the active transportation component of our master transportation plan. Moved by Councillor Randall, seconded by Councillor Adey. Discussion? Councillor Cunningham?
Is the meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock part of this transportation survey at the Crest?
Yes, it is.
I don't think a lot of the public's aware of it, but there's a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock at the Crest to discuss the transportation plan.
Yes, and if you just go to the city's social media page, we've extended the invitation. It was originally just a smaller stakeholder group, but because we didn't have as many people sign up as we'd like to because of summer holidays and things like that, we did put it out to the broader public. But you're right, I don't know if everybody knows about it. But if you wouldn't mind just looking for that contact information to RSVP, that would be helpful just because the Crest has limited space.
Correct. Awesome. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, on to item 4C. Report from the fire chief regarding fire engine build. Build. Yep, it just ends at build. Cool. Just says fire engine build. I'm here for it. Sounds like a very broad topic.
Thank
Welcome.
you. As a summary, the city is looking to replace our aging reserve fire engine, Engine 7. It's a 1998 AMLA France. The proposal to replace this was brought forward through the 5-year financial plan, and at the time was estimated the cost would be approximately $1 million to do this build. Actual numbers that have come back have been slightly higher. Part of that is due to COVID and the global pandemic and supply chain issues. We've seen increases in everything. Also, our dollar tanked recently, and so by the time we actually had hard numbers for a quote, it came in at $1.23 million. This wasn't included in the 5-year plan, so we were looking to council to accept an adjustment in that build price, so that we can move forward to award a tender to a commercial truck.
Okay. Right now we have a recommendation that council award the supply of the replacement fire engine to Commercial Equipment Co. and that council directs staff to include the additional acquisition costs in the 2023 5-year financial plan. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? Councillor Eddy?
Just a question. I noticed at one point that the specific apparatus was able to fit the compressed space of the station. I also know that in the longer term, presumably significantly longer term, we're looking at a new fire station. Would it be, I guess there's a couple of things to ask about that. One is, I'm going to assume that the need for this replacement is significantly more immediate than any plans for a new fire station coming to fruition. That being said, would it be safe to assume that the new fire station would have more space and therefore you'd have more range of choice in terms of the apparatus that you would purchase?
Through Chair, I would be very happy if you'd build me a fire station that had more space down in the road. I would. We can have that conversation when that happens. As far as building a shorter truck, we're losing we're going to be building this one about 20 to 24 inches shorter than maybe a standard truck. So we won't be compromising space on this build, and that will allow us to get this truck in sooner. It is going to be a critical piece of equipment for us. So yeah, I would like to see this truck in service as soon as possible. Without, we're not really going to be losing that much compartment space. It's a very well designed truck to maximize every single compartment that's on there, right from the passenger compartment through all the storage lockers that are on there. So we should be pretty good.
Perfect. Any further discussion, members of council? Okay, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Awesome. Thank you. All right, item 4D, report from planning regarding a June 2022 development activity report.
There's no further report required. If we could just have a motion from council to receive and file as provided.
Perfect. Sounds good. Moved by Councillor Niche. Second by Councillor Cunningham. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Item 4E, report from planning regarding DVP 21-10 for 1551 K. Smith Boulevard.
Yes, an application was received for development variance permit for the property located at 1551 K. Smith Boulevard. The application involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.15 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the western side property line in order to accommodate a deck and stairs. The required setback from a side property line in an R2 zone is 1.2 meters. The application also involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6C of the zoning bylaw to have a 1.16 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the western side property line to accommodate the house. It involves a further request for a variance of section 5.2.7A of the zoning bylaw to have a 10.2108 meter maximum building height, and the maximum building height in an R2 zone is 9 meters. There are no known negative impacts of the proposed variance on the surrounding neighborhood, and the public will have the opportunity to provide feedback during the public consultation period. The recommendation is that Council proceeds with the statutory notification process for DVP application 2110.
Okay, perfect. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Sorry, Councillor Eddie.
Yeah, this one strikes me as a little bit unique. If we look at the development variance report that we've just had submitted to us, this is a property that's been hanging around for some time. It was on hold for what looks like a calendar year, based on some need to establish either an easement or to remove encroachments. And I'm just wondering, I mean, this is a new building. It was, I believe it was built as of from 2020 on. I'm just wondering how we end up with a new building that needs all of these variances in order to move to completion. Would there not be some process by which some oversight of the construction would have prevented it coming to this point in this way? I don't know if that's a question for you or for somebody else, but.
I have to admit that I'm not terribly familiar with this file. So this is a building that was built with a building permit, and it was built outside of the proposed variances, outside of the proposed plan. So, you know, we don't catch those things until the times where inspections are done, and then that's when we get site certificates and so forth. So if the building was built not in accordance with the plans, and it results in encroachments, they're faced with either removing those encroachments or asking for a variance from council.
It's intuition telling me that Councillor Niche might have a couple things to say on this one.
So basically what it is that the rock didn't get broken out as much as originally anticipated, which the stairs on the side, if they were under 2 feet off the ground, they would be considered landscaping and you wouldn't have to actually have a permit for it. But because the house ended up being a little higher up than what was expected, then he's over that 2 feet off the ground for the stairs. That's why he's got to get a variance for the stairs. So it's basically like, you know, he built it to the plan somewhat, but unfortunately, because of the way the land lies with all the rock and stuff, he ended up being a little higher than what was expected, which made it so that the stairs now are part of the structure and not considered landscaping. So that's why he's got to get it done now. It's unfortunate, but that's basically what had happened.
Sorry, Councillor Cunningham.
Well, I talked to Councillor Nice about this a minute ago, and I thought, yeah, that's a fair explanation, but now you see these stairs are 7 feet high. That's a whole floor, you know, not 2 feet. So I don't see where it went from 2 feet to 7 feet by not taking out enough rock. He's got a whole floor there underneath, and the stairs are 7 feet up in the air, plus a door that's there already. So it instead of 2 feet, it's 7 feet. It's, you know, like all of a sudden 2 feet doesn't cut the mustard to me if it's a difference of 5 feet. You know, like, and the door is there, so the door was always going to be there, and he had planned to take these stairs up there. My question is, and Councillor Neese is better qualified to answer this than me, outside stairs, how wide do they have to be?
34 inches.
So he's got them at, what, 4 feet? So he could have made narrower stairs to meet the setback?
If you look at his garage door, you can see how on the pictures there, his truck is backed up against the, like he's got like about a 3-foot drop there just to get to his garage door. And that's because he couldn't chip the rock away enough, or chose not to chip the rock away enough. So he's now created the steep driveway to get up to that garage. And so that's, like I said, I mean, at the end of the day, you can basically blame this on, you know, what we have to deal with in this town, and it's either a big deep hole full of muskeg or it's a rock you're building on. So, you know, he really had to jackhammer out a lot more rock in order for the plans to work properly. You know, these plans are more generic plans that, you know, they're designed to work on a flat piece of land, and we don't have flat land here. So, you know, sometimes when, you know, you proceed, things, you run into things that that make you adjust your plans, and obviously in this scenario, the rock made the difference. You know, not to say that that's a good excuse, but it is the excuse in this scenario. Is, I mean, I don't think he really would prefer to have a driveway where he's got to go up a steep driveway into his garage, but that's what he ended up with because of the lie of the land. So, you know, I mean, I think he would probably prefer to have the whole house 3 or 4 feet lower, but just because of, you know, this town is challenging to build in, and that's really what's led to this. I'm sure the house, if you look on the original drawings, is probably designed to have the driveway right on ground level and this front door right on ground level, but because of the way it is, it just doesn't work around here. So it's not a good excuse, but it's an excuse.
Okay, sorry, Madam Corporate Administrator, you had some tools to perhaps cut the mustard, I think was the term that was used before. That's where we left off. Yeah.
Okay. So just a quick point of clarification. So the height variance is with respect to the entirety of the house. So where the zoning specifies 9 meters, this house is 10 point something. So that's where the variance comes in for the height. The setbacks are with respect to the actual footprint of the house on the property, with the stairs, and then at the other side of the house, he's basically almost at the property line. My understanding from the building department is that the footings that were encroaching on the neighbor's property have been removed, and the property is now no longer encroaching on the neighbor's property, although a variance will be required in order to achieve final occupancy from the building department. So this file will as well be, I believe it has already been, we're waiting for feedback from staff on this as well. So.
Okay. Councillor Cunningham?
I have no problem passing these variances, but I have a problem with the fact that we have to pass them. You know, the guy can't start tearing down his house, but you know, at the end of the day, he chose not to do certain things, and this required variances on both sides of the house plus the height, which is rather unusual. And you know, I don't know, you know, it just, like I say, I have no problem passing this variance, but at the same time, I'm wondering why we have to pass variances on the whole building, not just one aspect of it or another. But you know, again, you know, I'm for passing it, but I'm just a little amiss that we have to. You know, when we've turned down people that have, one person in particular, that came to us with plans to build a rather large house on a lot and turned them down ahead of time because of all the variances he needed. And then we had another one where we turned down a build after he built it and wanted a variance. And now this one here comes along, and it's, you know, it's really an interesting scenario. But you know, like if it was just one variance or even two, but you know, the guy's gone to the point of both sides and the height. But you know, like I say, there's no way I'm going to say not to pass it.
Dr. Buchan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification where we're at in the process, the recommendation is to proceed to notification, so the neighborhood will have a chance to speak to this first and explain whether or not they have concerns or with this or not. The second point is council does not have to say yes to a variance application. It is discretionary. It's something that you may feel compelled to, you know, given the choices to say yes to, but it is not. You're not obliged to say yes. You know, sometimes mitigating measures may need to occur in order to try to address some of the variances, if that's possible. It is entirely council's discretion here, acting in good faith.
So it's not a dictatorship, is what you're telling us. Perfect. Okay.
No, but the way
Awesome.
I look at it is, you know, I don't want to penalize a person for a few mistakes. You know, like I know we're not obligated to pass it, but still, I don't want to penalize somebody for it. And even if some of the neighbors are against it, it's a tough call, you know, for us. You know, like it's one of those things, but you know, it is what it is. That's all I'll say.
Perfect. Councillor Eddy?
I would agree that on a couple of points. I think that it's important to provide the public with a chance to weigh in on something like this. And I also agree that it would be a bridge too far, if I can use misapply an expression, to expect somebody to reverse the construction. So I'm not in favor of that either. I'm just wondering whether there may be, you know, looking forward to other constructions elsewhere, ways to put in some stopgaps that might prevent something like this happening again.
Through the chair, we will be looking at that to see, you know, what inspections were done and if things could have been caught a little bit earlier.
Any further discussion? Just to confirm, do we have a mover and seconder for this motion at this point? Madam Corporate Administrator, do we have a mover and seconder for this motion? We do.
Yes, we do. Councillor Niche
Perfect.
and Councillor Cunningham.
Perfect. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 4F, report from planning, DVP 22-18 for 144 2nd Avenue West.
Yes, so this application involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.4 of the zoning bylaw to have a lot coverage of 71%. The maximum lot coverage in an R2 zone is 50%. The application also involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6a of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.37084 meter setback from the front property line. The required setback from the front property line in an R2 zone is 3.6 meters. The application also involves a request for a variance of section 5.2.6c of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.4562 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the southwestern side property line. The required setback from a side property line in an R2 zone is 1.2 meters. The application involves a further request for variance of section 5.2.6c of the zoning bylaw to have a 0.36576 meter setback from a side property line in relation to the northeastern side property line. The proposed variances are requested by the applicant to accommodate a proposed front deck and stairs with an overhang over the front deck, a proposed overhang over the rear deck with side walls, and a proposed enclosure of the space beneath the rear deck. Certain property owners from the surrounding neighborhood have reached out to the city after hearing about the proposed variances from the applicant and have voiced their concerns. These property owners and the public will have the opportunity to provide input during the public consultation period. The recommendation is that council proceeds with the statutory notification process for DVP application 2218.
Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? Councillor Eddy?
At the risk of seeming difficult, I know that I looked backwards, and I know we granted a DVP 2203 on March 28th for this property. And I guess I'm curious about some background. Is this a plan that has kind of evolved into something more significant, and so now we are looking at additional variances for that reason? I guess I'm looking for a little background.
Yes, that's correct. So the previous DVP application was to add an addition to the house as well as a deck. And so this application is requesting further variances for a front deck with an overhang, stairs for the front deck, a rear deck overhang, as well as the enclosure of the space underneath the rear deck.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. On to item 4G. Report from planning regarding DVP 22-10 for 108 Prince Rupert Boulevard.
There's no report. We're just looking for council for consideration.
Perfect. So we'll go right on to the recommendation. Recommendation that council proceed with approval for development variance DVP, the application 22-10. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Discussion? Yeah. Nothing? No wisdom? Or difficulty?
I got one quick thing to say.
Okay, I left it open too long.
I've driven around and looked at a lot of these variances in the last month and this month, and we're asking to pass variances on things that are already started to be built or are built. And I'm wondering, like, is this getting out of control or what? Like I've noticed on 2 or 3 of the ones we got before us, they're already built. Whether it's a deck, it's framed in, things like this, or it's finished and things like this. And, like in most cases, I got no problem passing them. It's just like, it started before we're even being asked.
Through the chair,
of course,
we will make some inquiries to see whether or not any of these could have been dealt with earlier by staff or caught earlier. Sometimes things are simply built without any permits. Sometimes things are built with permits but not in accordance with the permit, and we only find out the encroachments or the variances at the time of particular inspections. Footing inspections, for example, when the footings are done and we have an opportunity to check for setbacks, that's what that inspection is, and survey certificate is supposed to allow us to do. Frame inspection is a typical time to check for height. So it really depends on the case, but we'll take a look internally and see whether or not there's more checks that we could be doing.
Okay, thank you. That explains it. If sometimes you start to build something and realize, oh my God. So it's just one of those things. It's just I happen to notice it. And I know it's been a concern to us on a couple of things. So,
any further discussion from members of council? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Item 4H, report from planning regarding DVP 22-13 for 1425 2nd Avenue West. Recommendation that council proceed with the approval for development variance DVP application 22-13. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor 80. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 4I, report from planning regarding DVP-22-14 for 535 Tatlow Street. Recommendation that council proceed with approval of development variance permit, application 22-14. Moved by Councillor 80, second by Councillor Randall. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 4J, report from planning regarding DVP-22-15 for 224 9th Avenue East. Recommendation that council proceed with approval for development variance permit application number 22-15. Moved by Councillor Randall, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? Madam Corporate Administrator.
Thank you. Just to note that we did receive one letter in support of the development variance permit, so that will be placed in the file. Perfect.
Thank you very much. Any discussion from members of council? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Item 4K, report from planning regarding DVP-22-16 for 116 Hayes Cove Circle. Recommendation that council proceed with the approval for development variance permit application number 22-16. Moved by Councillor Randall, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 4L, report from planning regarding DVP-22-17 for 336 6th Avenue East. Recommendation that council proceed with the approval for development's very permanent number application number 22-17. Moved by Councillor Nietzsche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. All right. Item 4M, report from planning regarding proposed interim parking management strategy. Welcome. On the hot topic of parking. Perfect.
I'm just going to pull up a visual presentation here. This is not it. Councillor Miro, can you confirm that you can see the screen?
I can, yeah, thank you.
Great. So the recommendation is to adopt the proposed interim parking management strategy and to direct council to implement or to action items upon budget and opportunity. So I'll go through this presentation and then can take questions. So this report includes a proposed interim parking management strategy that characterizes and proposes strategies to address parking issues in Prince Rupert's city core. These recommendations are intended to be actioned within the next 1 to 3 years. And this is an interim strategy because it will be complemented by a longer term and more comprehensive parking strategy in the citywide transportation plan that is currently being developed. This interim strategy was based on a review of current parking policy, local parking data, and the policy initiatives underway in the city. From this review, we know that the majority of people bring their vehicle downtown for work or shopping. Under our current parking management system, our zoning bylaw requires a certain number of parking spots for development. However, if current minimum parking requirements for off-street private parking were actually met in downtown, we would have approximately 4 times the number of off-street parking. Therefore, parking requirements far overestimate the number of off-street parking that is both needed and viable in our downtown space. We know that current time restrictions downtown are meant to increase turnover. However, they may limit options for employees looking to park for longer periods of time. And this can lead to employees taking up customer parking spaces, resulting in low turnover and availability of parking spaces for customers and a perceived parking shortage downtown. And we also know that our ticketing and pay and lieu systems can be inefficient. Our pay and lieu system is an alternative to meeting parking requirements where a business or property owner can do a one-time payment into a fund for public off-street parking. Until recently, the fee for pay and lieu has been far below the cost for equivalent stalls in a public parking lot. Similarly, bylaw ticketing for parking has low fees and low rates of payment. So far this year, we have only had, as of June, I should say, we've had about 25% payment rate of tickets, which reflects previous years. Therefore, the perceived parking shortage that many people speak of in Prince Rupert may actually be poor locations for parking, inefficient parking prioritization, lack of walkability, and enforcement capacity constraints. Parking management requires changing the way we think about parking programs and solutions in order to manage the diversity of problems that may arise, as well as weigh solutions and their impacts. Parking management is also key to meeting planning principles outlined in the official community plan that support healthy, sustainable, and diverse land use patterns, which includes reducing sprawl and automobile dependence. Furthermore, it can support other community goals of city core revitalization, increasing housing affordability and meeting standards of economic efficiency, feasibility, and capacity constraints, as well as be integrated and flexible with other land use decisions and systems. The interim strategy recommends parking management that supports these goals by ensuring that parking is shared and not private. It increases density and walkability, incentivizes development, and reduces oversupply. That parking is efficient and equitable, thus reducing conflicts between employee and customer parking, supporting vibrancy downtown, and being reactive to changing needs. And ensuring that parking management is forward-thinking, meaning that it is adapted to technological change, encourages greener and more sustainable transportation, and ensures that there is infrastructure and capacity to implement parking management. The strategy includes the following recommendations. I will go over each and provide a bit more detail on a few of them, and then at the end I can answer any more questions that you may have about each recommendation. So the first recommendation is to remove minimum parking requirements from a parking specified area downtown, as shown in this slide. The red area outlines a parking specified area where we are recommending removing parking minimum requirements and ensuring no loss of existing parking in this area. It is targeted areas that are intended for densification and development. City staff found that there was 1,677 existing private off-street parking spaces downtown. If minimum parking requirements were met, there would need to be approximately 5,105 more stalls downtown. Therefore, existing minimum parking requirements overestimate actual need for parking downtown, as well as promote sprawl and automobile dependence. Removing minimums in this area incentivizes development because it does not take up otherwise developable lots or green space. It encourages more customer use as it increases foot traffic and allows developers to determine parking supply based on market demands. Removing minimums also demonstrate long-term thinking as technological developments and other strategies being explored in the transportation plan are likely to reduce automobile dependence and need for parking. Removing parking minimums downtown is unlikely to result in parking shortage based on findings from a 2007 study that lots were very rarely near capacity or not very often reaching peak capacity, which is 85%, along with other proposals that will be presented in the transportation plan to reduce parking need. And just generally, it is more efficient to shift to contingency-based planning for shared parking lots than continue to rely on private parking that's planned for worst-case scenarios, which is what minimums may often lead to. The following recommendation is to reconfigure 2nd and 3rd Avenues West to increase on-street parking. On-street parking is a form of shared parking, which serves many destinations. It does not compete for developable land or green spaces, and it can provide traffic calming, which increases pedestrian safety. This is a cross-section of the proposed parking, proposed design concept that the city staff are in discussion with the province. It would include angled parking as well as a bike lane along 2nd Avenue. And we'll just note that this concept is dependent on the province's approval, as 2nd Avenue West is a provincial highway. So the next one is, encourage shared parking agreements. These can be developed by implementing opportunities for existing businesses to rent out their required stalls for commercial or public use through arrangements that would be administered by the city. The next one, due to increased capacity to accommodate parking due to their relative widths of 2nd and 7th Streets, staff have identified these as potential opportunities to serve longer-term parkers in the city, specifically employees. And this may be accomplished through changing time restrictions that permit longer-term parking. Next one is to seek opportunities to develop public parking lots in the city core as needed to serve longer-term users through land acquisition or conversion of municipally owned lots. This management action supports contingency-based planning and recognizes the need for increased long-term parking that is better placed to strategically support high-demand areas, and seeking opportunities for public off-street parking lots. For example, on Lot 9 is one option to address this need. Parking management benefits from increased enforcement. In the next 1 to 3 years, staff would look into ways that enforcement of parking regulation and management can be more efficient and increase compliance. Implementing an interim parking wayfinding strategy. A parking wayfinding system is an integrated electronic or signage system that indicates where parking lots are located and identifies regulations and pricing for each location. These systems can support locals and visitors finding parking, reduce frustration at lack of parking, and shift thinking about parking shortage. And then finally, last one here is to incentivize electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and it is important for Prince Rupert to accommodate and incentivize growth in electric vehicles amongst its residents, and this includes the implementation of EV or electric vehicle charging infrastructure. So that's the end of the slideshow, but the interim parking management strategy is a first step in responding to Council's 2022 strategic direction for a parking strategy, and an important step in helping to meet goals for downtown revitalization and those developed through the redesign process and official community plan. And I and other staff are available to take questions, clarify, or provide more detail on any of these recommendations.
Okay, so recommendation as it stands is that Council approve the proposed Prince Rupert interim parking management strategy and request staff to proceed with implementing the strategy as opportunity and budget permit. Moved by Councillor Niche. Second by Councillor Randawa. Discussion? I'm looking optimistically at you, Councillor Yady. Yeah.
Always the source of optimism.
Yeah.
I want to start by saying I'm absolutely in favor of strategic parking policies. We've heard for the entire time I've been serving that it's a system that doesn't necessarily make everybody happy. And so we're always aiming to make people happy. So anything we can do in that regard, I think, is good. What you've laid out are a series of 8 recommendations, and I think that there's some, obviously a lot of work went into pulling it all together and analyzing the situation. And I think there's some really good ideas in it. I think there are likely some ideas that will provoke opinions out there. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions about a couple of these actions. The first action, removing minimum parking requirements downtown. You pointed out in the report that there's a history of how we've managed these things in the past. And one of the places in that history that we've heard quite a bit about was the parking in lieu requirements and the changing in fees. And I know we dealt, I think, last year with identifying a need to make that a more muscular fee. But there are people who, way back in the dawn of time, paid what I think would have seemed like a significant fee. And some of those people still run their businesses in those places. So I can only imagine that if I was one of those people and I saw that all of a sudden now it's going to be free, I might have an opinion about that. So I think that we need to ensure that we recognize that there's going to be some people who look at that and say it's not fair. Why did I have to pay when somebody new establishing a new business is not going to have to? So I would like to think that there's some thought being put into how to present that in a way that maybe puts people's minds at ease or helps them move towards a place where they might think that they're at least being acknowledged in the spirit of fairness. I don't know what to suggest in terms of spelling that out, but I think it's important to do that. Excuse me. On the shared parking agreements, I'm just wondering whether what the proposal talks about is shared parking agreements between the city and private entities, but also potentially shared parking between private entities. All of, in each case, some oversight by the city in terms of enforcement. I'm just wondering whether these would be sort of one-size-fit-all, generic, or would each agreement have different features based on who is involved in reaching an agreement?
Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Chair, if I can maybe have a go at answering the first question and then defer the second question to Mifani Pope. That'd be okay?
Of course.
Okay, so anytime, with respect to the first question of this, people being concerned about equity or fairness, anytime we change our regulations, we change the rules, and somebody can always ask that question. The council actually made a whole bunch of changes to the zoning bylaw parking regs a little over a year ago. And in some cases, the standards were lowered significantly. So they could have asked the same questions at that time. And historically, there's been a number of variance applications that have been granted to folks that have had applications because they couldn't or didn't want to provide all of the parking. So there, in council's deliberations, there's, it doesn't always mean that everybody is, going to be subject to the same rules. The rules can change if the council believes that it's in the public interest to do that. So, this is proposing a rule change with respect to, recommendation number 1 on changing the parking requirements. There will be a public process for that. To do this has to be a change in the zoning bylaws. So people will have an opportunity to express their concerns, if any, to council. There's a trade-off here in terms of providing private parking or making sure the city has sufficient parking. And part of the way that this the sufficient parking is achieved is by public investment in reconfiguring roads, in acquiring additional lands for public lots. So this represents a change in approach, a significant change in approach from the council, saying, where we think it's in the public interest for us to be providing the parking in these areas through these different mechanisms. Does that mean that you go back to everybody that built parking lots or parking in the past and say, well, you overbuilt per our new standard, we're going to make up that for you? No, that would be really unviable to do. And by extension, cash and lieu is, that it's unviable. There's no mechanism for returning money. You can't give, do assistance to business. It's a change in approach, which, changes the rules for everybody going forward. And, we go through due process in that. So, the equity thing is difficult when there's changes in rules. The question is it in the public interest to do it? The second point?
Yeah, and I can respond to the shared agreement. So there are several ways that you can implement shared agreements. As you mentioned, outlined, it can be between a city and between a private business or supplier of parking, or it can be between individual businesses or separate businesses. I think if we were to move forward on that goal, there are several ways that it can be implemented. If we can choose to do a template and investigate whether like a sort of generic one-size-fits-all would be better for the community. We may do some engagement on how to approach that, but I think that would be at the implementation stage. One thing that may be an option is to just develop something like a commercial stall lease permit, and so that would be a one-size-fits-all, and you just go through a permitting process with that. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Or?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
A couple things. Less than a year ago, we did the OCP, and I strongly voted against it because of the parking in lieu of 12,005. And less than a year from now, we're sitting here saying we're going to do away with it. And I know of one project that was shelved simply because of that 12,500 parking place. Shared parking, very limited in this town. It works great in a town like Vancouver, where there's lots of private industry for parking. We only have 2 large lots. Not, even the overweighty lots, a problem with Niska Hall or the Fisherman's having an event and people park in that parking lot and people going shopping can't get in there. And there's no agreement there. It's just, people. You've got Rupert Square right now not wanting people to park there unless they're shopping in Rupert Square. And Safeway, same scenario. you're not shared parking. We've got very limited resources. It works great in a larger community because there's more private parking places. Here we don't have it. So I think that concept in this town, unless you can prove me wrong, is not an attractive one. You know, possibly somebody can buy some flat land in this town and put in a private parking lot and we can share it with them. But, you know, you're talking about enhancing green spaces. Well, you're going to be taking property away that could possibly be a green space. You know, the corner of McBride and 3rd. We've got a very large lot there, but we're looking at that as a gateway project. And, you know, that whole area there, there's large private empty lots there that could be used for parking, but they're not because people don't want to burden themselves with the problem of liability and everything else in a big lot. You know, and then you go further along, you're like, I think if we remove parking restrictions in the downtown area, we've already got a problem with people that are employed in the downtown area parking. You know, in a 1-2 block area, I can name 6-7 people, maybe even more, that I can watch every 2 hours if you want to sit there for 2.5 hours and watch them come out of their buildings, move their vehicles around, and it's almost a coordinated movement because I'll take this spot, you take that spot, and they move around. And, you know, and if you take those restrictions away and it's just a free-for-all, you're going to have less availability for parking in the downtown area, I believe. You know, that's just my thought on it. You know, and in the winter, in this town, people are not going to walk downtown from the east side or the west side. They're going to drive. It's just, you know, our weather, we've got a fantastic bus transportation system if people would use it, but people don't. You know, it's why, I don't know. But, you know, it's just, parking's always going to be a problem in this downtown area because of the winter conditions and that. And I think that, you know, these are great recommendations and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and we can try some of them and see what happens, but I can definitely see some problems. And the parking in lieu, and, you know, I'm baffled that less than a year ago we were talking about $12,500 park in lieu. Now we're saying we'll just throw it out the window.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this is a challenging problem. And I recall council during the revision of the zoning bylaw and doing the official committee plan talking about expressing concerns about, well, a lot of our properties in the downtown, they're completely built on. We can't put parking on. So are we going to enforce parking requirements on those buildings for a change in use? You know, if they want to, you know, add on to the building, or if they want to change the use, which would result in a higher parking standard, that was identified as a problem by council. Our urban forum has resulted in a lack of an ability to go and put on-site parking on a lot of these properties. And council will recall that we discussed this solution at that time, which was greeted with some interest, I would say, generally from council, as a way of solving that parking standard problem. Now, it's not just removing the parking standard. It's saying, you know, for these properties, we're going to remove it, and the city will invest in alternative parking locations through street reconfiguration and through acquiring property so that the city can provide on-street parking. That's an approach that has been done very successfully in a lot of communities, where there are city-run parking parcels at strategic locations, so that the urban forum can be more compact, which is part of the official community plan's policy, is compact, complete communities, so that we don't make our downtown a big parking lot. I think the analysis, if you read through this again, you'll see that if actually every property you know, that's being built provided all of the parking that was required, we're short by a profound margin right now for the parking that's required for our regulations. That means that our regulations are wrong, because parking, there is parking available. And what we're suggesting is this change is done in a way that we don't lose any parking, and we augment existing parking, and then we do this in order to enable the redevelopment of the downtown strategically. The cash in lieu remains for the rest of the city if there's parking problems, but if the parking is required, you need to do the cash in lieu. That's an option for somebody to do. So this area is being identified for very specific reasons. Principally, the urban forum that council wants would be facilitated through this strategic approach. So it's taking it away from, to some extent, from private investment and putting it into the council's responsibility, still making sure that there is sufficient parking. Mr. Chair, just for clarity, there are processes to follow. I would say all of these recommendations, but the one big one, of course, is this then gets fed into the transportation master plan, and all these get revisited in that, and so there's a chance for fine tuning, and a vetting and process in terms of this. This is basically initial direction to allow us to, I would say, initially start to deal with that very specific point of the parking restrictions, parking standards in that specified area, so that we can remove that barrier, enable the development to proceed where there's a serious challenge in providing parking.
So in layman's terms, would be to get the ball rolling, I think, is what the terminology would be, in a way.
Yes, and this isn't experimentation. It's a model that works in other places.
Of course, yeah. Sorry, and we had Councillor Cunningham. Yeah.
So, like 25% of the tickets we've given out are paid. 75 are being ignored. That's 75% of the people downtown parking are just thumbing their nose up to us. I know we're coming up to a new bylaw change that might help that, and I think that if people start realizing they ought to pay their tickets, guess what? Maybe somebody, I know people that have 6, 7 tickets, and they, well, I don't care how many you get, I'm not going to pay them. It's but what I don't want to see is us making changes that are going to create more problems. And and that's what I think there's great recommendations in here, but maybe not for this particular geographic region, and that's my concern. I know my age. I walk as much or more than a lot of people, but come certain weather conditions, I jump in the car and drive downtown along with a couple of hundred other people, and things like that, and that's where. And I know we're going to have to play and fiddle and pull pieces in and out of this to get it to work finally the way we want to, and it's not going to work the first time, obviously, because we're doing it again. But I just think there's going to be a lot of people that are, we get back to this equity thing, I just don't know, how many new buildings have we got where we did a variance for the parking in the last, since the 12,500 came out, that I know of. I don't think any.
I don't think we've had any new buildings, and I don't think we've had significant renovations and changes of use, which the current regulations are a barrier to. So,
And I think I mentioned that when we passed it with the OCP, how it was going to be a barrier to people developing or changing, because $12,500 is a lot of money to come up with up front before you build something.
So this is a solution to that problem that you raised.
Yeah.
This is here, I think, in part, and I didn't want to say this earlier, but this was an issue that I think that you raised, Councillor Cunningham, about their standards being a barrier. So this is here to address that, and with a recommendation to actually provide the parking, but as a public investment. So it's not to create a problem, it's to actually address a problem and provide a solution for the parking that's required. And now, clearly, this is not going to happen all at once. If we adopt this, we know how long it takes for investment decisions to occur and for investment development interests to develop for the city. So we have time to acquire the strategic parcels that we need for parking. We have and time to do the work for reconfigurations, and we can probably scale the provision of new parking along with the response to new development in the downtown. There's investment decisions, I think, that are waiting for council to actually make this decision. I'm aware of one significant one that is waiting on it right now. In my view, based on the input that I've had from local development interests, this would be a good thing. Now, there is a public process to make that change. It'd be a change to the zoning bylaw, the parking regulations in the zoning bylaw. We will there will be an opportunity for people to weigh in on it.
So how much of this parking fund that's been going on in the last 20 years, how much is in it?
I believe.
Sorry, Corinne.
Corinne, I can actually answer that. It's approximately 147,000.
That's a start.
And we will be using that and needing that for the public, the parking areas that we want to develop, along with other investment.
And one last thing, and then I'll shut up, is when I look at the parking plan for 2nd Avenue, in my mind anyway, I think we'd be better off, instead of taking it this way, putting it this way, so you go by and back in, so when you drive out, you're not backing into the traffic. I think if we have parking places where people drive straight in and back into the traffic, you're gonna have an increase in accidents. They might be slight, as your report says, just fender benders, but they're gonna be there because, if you drive ahead and back up, people see your signal indicator on, and I've noticed this downtown when I decide to park sometime in a very large truck, people will stop and give me the space. And I just think it's a funny little thing, but just by moving those lines, instead of driving straight in, you go by and back in. I think that might be a better solution to that type of angle parking. Just a thought from a driver.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Councillor Niche, then Councillor Randall.
Parking. We all love parking. So the one you talk about removing all the parking requirements from downtown. So now with this area that we've talked about, kind of making more like the uptown section where we want to encourage more residential housing. So, Midtown, there it is. So in the Midtown area, if we're trying to encourage residential housing, are you saying that we don't want to have, like, if you were to build housing in any other neighborhood, you would have to have one parking stall per unit? So are we going to go to, like if somebody goes and builds 30 townhouses, down 2nd Avenue or 3rd Avenue, are they going to be required to have a parking stall per unit?
So the parking specified area doesn't actually cover the whole downtown. It does cut off with a lot of Midtown still still subject to parking requirements. Okay. Because thinking around residential development still requiring parking is important, as well as hotels and other sort of hotel development. In cases of residential development that would happen in the parking specified area, they would not be subject to parking requirements. That being said, if you're putting in a residential development like a multifamily housing, that's what most of the zoning is in that zone. You do play to the market. You need to make sure there's parking for your units. And so it would actually, what this does is it encourages private developers to manage parking themselves. So they're going to put in parking that meets market demands, and also think about, if it's downtown, there is likely going to be a less need for parking. And they may put pieces that reduce demand for parking. So, so it isn't supposed to cover too much of where that residential development is going in, but in cases where it does, there are likelihood that it would still provide sufficient parking for what's needed.
I mean, I look at our downtown and obviously people will always complain about parking because, I mean, we are a compact community. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We don't have that sprawl of buildings like you would have, say, in Terrace, where, someone builds something. Well, they just build on the edge, and it creates sprawl, which I don't really think is a great thing either. So we are limited to our options in this town, and by the time we get this right, we'll be in flying cars, like I said one other time. So we might not need these, but the reality is, all these stores along 3rd Avenue, I mean, if they were to build to today's standards, like you said, having the required parking, really none of these businesses would be there because they wouldn't be able to provide the parking. So this is a problem that was created when everyone was taking their horse downtown, or minimal cars or walking. So, we can't change what was built here in 1910. We can only try and make it better. And, from what you're saying, I mean, I kind of get what you're saying. It's hard to accept a full, no parking, because I don't know if that's the right answer either. But I do think that, us trying to promote parking in other areas or adapt, I think is a good thing. And, you talk about 2nd Avenue. Well, as soon as all these trucks disappear off 2nd Avenue, as soon as the ring road opens, I'm sure that's going to, decrease the amount of traffic on 2nd Avenue and which will help, with traffic. And I'll use Smithers as an example. 3rd Avenue is a pretty wide street, and there's parking on it, but I think there could be better options for parking on 3rd Avenue. And if you look at Smithers as an example, people slow down through Main Street of Smithers because all of their corners come out. So they're short crosswalks, and you feel that you should slow down. You don't feel like you should drive through there doing 50 kilometers an hour. Even though that might be the legal speed limit, you don't feel like you should drive doing 50 kilometers an hour because you're being forced to slow down because you're more concerned about running someone over because they're closer to the street, and I think that on 3rd Avenue that would actually probably work spectacular if every crosswalk the sidewalks came out further, because it's going to slow people down. And eventually when there's less traffic on 2nd Avenue and you put in more angled parking and more areas where you can make up for parking, then I do think that you're on the right track for making this happen. I just am just a hair skeptical as far as completely eliminating all parking spots. That's really my only portion.
Just to clarify, it's not eliminating any of the existing stalls. It's any additional stalls required as a result of renovation that results in change in use or building expansion. So the regs would be written in a careful way to make sure that's the case. And for the Midtown, I think we can actually have a little more finesse in that and say for residential buildings only. That's a complete rebuild. So there's an opportunity for them to make sure that there is on-street or off-street parking. So we could make that an ongoing requirement for pure residential multifamily developments.
Go ahead.
I was going to make a similar clarification, but also just to clarify that this is no more parking requirements, but businesses will likely provide some parking still in what makes sense to develop.
Thank you. Councillor Randhawa, and then back to Councillor Cunningham. And then, Councillor Randhawa, Councillor Eadie, because we're not going to forget Councillor Eadie. Then back to Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a question, do we have already traffic study done yet, or we have to, like city will do or provincial government will do on 2nd Avenue?
Maybe
Are we talking of, excuse me, through
Like
the chair?
traffic study, right? Like how would that will impact on traffic, right? Like even like these days, 2 lanes, right, on 2nd Avenue. Sometimes it's really busy, right? So if we eliminate 1 lane, we can have extra bike lane and extra stalls, right? Parking
So
stalls.
we're talking about the conceptual reconfigurations of 3rd and 2nd Avenue?
Yes, like we have study.
Yeah, those have been prepared by our consulting engineer, so that has that input in there already, and it's being discussed with the Ministry of Transportation and Highways. So that's an ongoing process.
Yes.
This is, approving the interim strategy doesn't approve those configurations.
Yes.
There's still other processes, significant processes, and time to follow.
Yeah, because if you can even get extra bike lane and extra parking, that's good, great.
Mm-hmm.
But on the same time, like we have only 1 lane, right? Like then all the ambulance sometimes they have to pass, fire truck they have to go, and somebody is backing into 1 lane, right? So those things will maybe slow down or safety concern too.
Well, and I think slowing down is actually one of the benefits that comes out
Yes.
of a road reconfiguration. That's a benefit to the retail. That's the shops that are along the street. That's a benefit to pedestrians. That's the reconfiguration that we're proposing. Allows for the bicycle lanes in there. So there's lots of benefits that are associated with this. We have a ways to go in terms of process and discussion, and this all still gets referred on to our transportation planners that are doing the overall master transportation plan.
Yeah,
Before we carry on this discussion, I just want to clarify that there's a really, really gigantic key word that I want to focus on that is an interim strategy. Also that there are adjustments that will be able to be made along the way. Just for the sake of time, because I think we've been at like the 45-minute mark here, just in those regards. So for the remainder of the discussion, I guess for those pieces is just kind of really take those pieces of context into mind, that there can be changes made along the way, because I'm seeing 3 to 4 clarifications for the same question repeatedly. So I will pass the torch over to Councillor Adie.
You took the words right out of my mouth, but I'd like to make about a 30-minute speech about it. Yeah. First of all, your point's well taken about the nature of change. Just because something was doesn't mean that it has to be that way all the time. I appreciate the point. I'm not sure everybody will, but I understand the point you're making. I agree. I think it's an interim strategy. I think that we won't actually find out necessarily what works about it and what doesn't work about it until one does it. And I think there is a point at which you have to just say this is a good draft plan. Let's move with it. I actually support it in some. I just think there's specific elements of it that I think we will find ourselves examining as we go along. So I just would contend that I think it's a good plan. I support it, and I think that within it we should remain open to changing it as we go along.
Perfect. Councillor Cunningham.
Basically, what I was going to say in a more elegant way. The only question I have is, and I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this, is we've talked about densifying the downtown area. So if you take the commercial buildings downtown, and a lot of them have commercial space up on top, and some of them are thinking converting to residence now. Now, do they have to have parking places for those residents upstairs? And if we remove the parking requirement times, or we're talking about doing that also, so now somebody could theoretically live in a suite up there and park there all day. Is this right?
So a couple things to clarify. One is if they were to convert an existing building to residential, the current standards would apply, and what we have been discussing is potentially maintaining that requirement for residential. So if any residential unit were to go in, the potential would be that they would still require parking, off-street parking for that unit. Second, the proposal is not to remove any timed. The proposal is there's an opportunity to potentially turn some of the on-street parking to longer periods of time. So for example, 4 hours. And that would allow employees to park in strategic areas downtown that isn't directly in front of the stores that takes up customer parking. Does that clarify? Answer your question?
So what you're saying is in certain areas you'll have 2 hour, in other areas you'll have 4 hours.
Yeah, and the 4 hours would be placed strategically so that they're not blocking parking where customers or other priority users might want to park there for shorter periods of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation and all of the thought that was put into that. And we can see it's a hot topic and it's something of great importance. And I'd almost want to apologize again because I feel like you keep getting the short straw here and we end up with these 45-minute debates. But thank you very much. So we do have a motion on the floor. So I will call to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. It's almost like we're on the same page here, guys. Yes. Thank you.
Even though you got grilled.
You did do a very good job, yeah. And you did a very good job getting grilled as well, yeah. All right. Item 4N, report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding May 2022 financial variance report.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, the operating and utility revenues and expenses are currently on target and in line with expectations. It is expected that inflation may impact future performance to the budget. As mentioned in the last variance report, some of our largest capital projects are in completion stage and others are at their beginning. There are no significant variances to report at this time. Costs associated are expected to be received midsummer through fall. This concludes my report.
Thank you, and we will. We'll call this a question, I suppose.
If you could do a motion, please, to receive.
Motion, yes, motion to receive. That would be the one. We've got a recommendation at the bottom. So then report, yes, and we're looking for a report from yourself as well, is there not? There's an item O that's connected to the recommendation beneath.
Yes, prior to that, if I could get a motion to receive and file the financial variance
We
report.
can do that, yeah. So we would put it on a motion. So I don't have a recommendation on this one, so I'll just receive the 2022 financial variance report. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? We got all night. We can open another 45-minute discussion. All right. All those in favor? Motion's carried. All right. On to item 4.0. Report from our corporate administrator regarding bylaw notification system. Madam Corporate Administrator, you have the floor.
Thank you. So bylaw enforcement is a common issue within all local governments, and the Local Government Bylaw Notice Enforcement Act provides municipalities with an alternative approach for resolving minor bylaw infractions. Local governments may establish a local government bylaw dispute adjudication system which can replace the provincial court as a venue for resolving minor bylaw issues. Under this system, the City of Prince Rupert would work with the BC Ministry of Attorney General to appoint an adjudicator. Adjudications may be done then electronically due to our remote location. The cost of the bylaw adjudication system will vary depending on the volume of bylaw infractions. However, municipalities who participate in an adjudication process see an increase in payment of fines on average of over 40%. So what we are looking for tonight is a resolution from council that they support staff's request for inclusion into a bylaw notice system, which would allow for more timely collection of bylaw penalties. If council supports and passes the requested resolution, and the official request is made and submitted to the Ministry of the Attorney General, processing may take 6 to 8 weeks for full inclusion into the program, and then staff-based, on these estimates, staff-based assume that the program will then be in place for fall of 2022.
Perfect. So a recommendation right now is that council approves staff to enter a bylaw notice system for minor bylaw infractions. Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Councillor Niche.
A couple things about that kind of relate to this that I'd like to ask is as an example, a bylaw ticket for no insurance. If we were to give somebody a ticket. Now, when we are scanning those with our truck, do they actually tell us if they have insurance or not? Because now, with ICBC changing their system and they no longer require stickers on their plates, how does that affect us? Because if all of a sudden we can't tell if a vehicle is insured, then how do we even know if they have insurance?
Thank you. Bylaw officers do have the ability to look up vehicles through an ICBC registration system to confirm registration.
And secondly, could we not implement something for, I guess repeat offenders where we're having problems collecting? Could we not? And we talked about this before, but could we not have a like a boot? Where the bylaw boots the vehicles, and if they want to get their vehicle unbooted, then they pay their fines. So it's been discussed in the past, and I thought we were going to go that route, but just curious.
I was thinking we purchase a Hawaiian shirt for Councillor Niche so we can have some Operation Repo Prince Rupert version. That's my recommendation.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. We actually do have boots, and really, if council wishes, we can certainly look at amending the bylaw, and it is completely within your control what we do in terms of enforcement of the bylaws and how those bylaws are written and amended.
Well, just my, I've heard the comment before, and I know of many people that don't pay their bylaws because, as it states on the ticket, it is a voluntary ticket. So they feel that they don't have the need to pay it, and there is no enforcement to pay it. And so if we want to, I guess, it's one thing if someone gets one ticket, but if, there's people out there, and and as you can tell now, if you drive around our town, our bylaw officers have been busy, and I see many vehicles around town where there's multiple tickets on the vehicles. So, I guess two questions. Why are they not getting booted, or why are they not getting towed? Because then that would actually, if they get towed, then they would have to pay the tickets to get them back. Or if they get booted, then they'd have to pay the tickets to release it. So I think that, we can probably up our 25% payment if just by doing a couple quick changes without even having to go as far as this. I think we could make people pay more on the ones that are blatantly not paying their tickets.
Thank you. As you've noted, the tickets at present are voluntary, so it would be pretty difficult to boot a voluntary ticket. However, with the implementation of the adjudication system, once you don't pay your ticket after a certain number of days, it does go to collections, and then there is no option to not pay your ticket. You will go before an adjudicator, and providing the evidence that is presented, you will be required to pay your ticket.
Councillor Cunningham.
So on out-of-province tickets, and we have, I know of repeat offenders that come here to go fishing every year and just throw the ticket away when they get it down at Rustbrook and that. When we change it to an adjudicator system, if they don't pay those tickets, can we then boot them?
Thank you. Under the adjudication system, there will not be an option to not pay it. If you don't pay your ticket, you will go to collections. If the bylaw is changed to include booting a vehicle and subsequent towing, then that is something that we can do.
I'm just, maybe this is a question for Dr. Buchan, but like I know going to collection when you live in another province is might be a little bit different than going to collection. Like we can go after them through ICBC or motor vehicle branch or something like that. I'm possible with adjudication. Well, we can't do that with somebody from out of province, can we?
I think collections is federal. I think the FinTrack systems and pieces like that are, and TransUnion, I believe, has some notions on that affects people's credit and things like that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I honestly don't know. I have heard anecdotally that if you get a ticket in another province, it's pretty hard for them to collect. But I honestly don't know. So we can follow up with you as it comes back. And just a note, I mean, this was educational for me. It's one piece of our regulatory framework that I wasn't fully aware of. Our voluntary system, voluntary fine is not a fine. It's an invitation to make a contribution, which people can properly and understandably ignore if there's no requirement to make a payment. So this would change that profoundly. I think that I think it's I would strongly recommend that we go in this direction. We can get an answer on the out of province collections when it comes back.
Yeah.
Okay, another aspect of this while we're on this bylaw, and we're concentrating on parking, but how do we amend this bylaw by neighbor, complaint-driven system, so the bylaw officers can just go and ticket people if they see, especially with the property maintenance things?
Just a note as the chair, but we have this discussion quite frequently, I believe, and I know that there's some parameters and legal requirements, especially like things that can tie us up in court and different things like that, especially if we are going and taking people's property and things like that. I know that there's some pieces that as prerequisites, meaning things that we have to have in advance to be able to actually do that in the first place, if I'm not mistaken, just because we have had this discussion quite frequently.
Well, if I can interrupt here,
sure.
I've talked to the bylaw officers in Terrace who do the same. They don't go by complaint driven. They just, if they say an infraction, they ticket the people. And, they've come down here to visit and just can't believe the condition of some of our properties and that. Mm-hmm. And if they're obviously in violation of our maintenance property bylaw. And I see no reason why we have to wait for a neighbor to complain about somebody's property. But anyway.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. City Manager, go ahead. Yeah, and and also just another note with this particular motion is regarding a bylaw notification system that would further enhance some of these pieces. So that it's a voluntary ticket until it goes to that system. Then at that point, it would be strongly more encouraged to pay that ticket. But go ahead, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two things. I mean, these are interesting points.
Yes.
The short answer to how do you go about changing the policy is you could do it right now with the resolution. It would be a council resolution to adopt the policy. Now we'd have to put some words around the policy, but it wouldn't take much to have a policy. We currently have practice. We do not have council policy on bylaw enforcement. We have practice. So that is one of the things that we would be proposing to address in next year's strategic plan. I think it's probably a good idea to have policy. The other thing to be really cognizant of is we've just recently doubled our bylaw enforcement capacity. We were up to 2. There's a limited amount you can do with 2 bylaw enforcement officers. So in the process of developing policy around enforcement, a really important discussion is resources for actually carrying out the policy. So this is. While I was saying this could be done just with resolution, it could be. It's not a good idea just to quickly make a resolution on this. This is something that has to be thought about in terms of the implications of additional staff and resources, and what council's philosophy is around bylaw enforcement. So I think this is a really good discussion, an important one that we will be suggesting to next year's council that we get into.
Of course. Thank you very much. Councillor Adie?
I think next year's council won't know what hit them. I'd just like to speak in favor of this. I think this is a good idea. I think it expands the repertoire of how we deal with things. I think if it makes a dent in the 25% return for people who are committing minor, albeit minor, violations, that most people understand and know they're doing it. So I don't have any problems with it, so I'm going to support it.
Call the question. Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. So on on the very on brand and on topic, by the way, Councillor Eddy. Thank you. So recommendation as stands that council enter and approve. So I believe we have a motion on the floor. So we will call this to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right. Item 4P. Report from the fire chief regarding Prince Rupert Fire Department response to medical incidents.
It would appear the fire chief had to step out, so I will jump in for him.
Perfect. Thank you.
So on your desks this evening is a late item. The reason for the report was that the Provincial Ambulance Service, referred to as the BCAS, has struggled to provide appropriately staffed ambulances in the community. This has shifted additional burden onto the Prince Rupert Fire Rescue, the PRFR, to provide pre-hospital care for the community. This shift has potential impact to the department's response to fire and rescue incidents and creates additional expenses to the city to cover this provincially funded system. Over the last year, the PRFR has witnessed numerous times where the community has been left without an ambulance. These situations occur when the BCAS ambulances are tasked out of the community to conduct patient transfers or due to staffing shortages. More frequently, an ambulance may arrive to a medical incident with only one paramedic, requiring the firefighter to drive the ambulance and the patient to the hospital. This has resulted in long delays for patients needing transport to the Prince Rupert Hospital, with solutions including sending an ambulance from Terrace to Kitimat to transport patients within the community. The current fire apparatus is not licensed to transport patients, but firefighters are trained in EMR certification to meet the provincial requirements for transporting patients. Firefighters are not permitted to drive an ambulance without a paramedic in attendance due to the BCAS policy. BCAS policy allows for non-BCAS employees to drive ambulances only in extreme circumstances. This is intended to provide flexibility for unusual and unpredictable events, but this intention has transitioned from emergency situations to a weekly reliance on firefighters to fill the gaps of driving the ambulance. Placing a firefighter as a driver in an ambulance takes the employee out of service as a firefighter and then depletes the crew's amount of ability to mount a fire response should that be required. These situations may result in overtime calls back to replenish staffing levels. While driving, insurance is provided through the BCAS fleet insurance policy, but this may not be extended to liability and WorkSafe coverage in the event of an accident. The city would be responsible for the additional cost if a firefighter is involved in an accident while driving the ambulance. Dispatching to medical incidents is completed through the BCAS Kamloops Dispatch Center. Calls for medical incidents are processed through a grading matrix, with most critical calls being classified as purple. The original intention of the first responder program was to augment the BCAS service to provide life-saving interventions prior to ambulance arrivals on critical calls. The PRFR often responds to non-critical patients because the information gathered through the initial call is different than what is observed once the patient contact is made. Responding to purple calls will only help alleviate the volume of incidents that the firefighters attend and focus resources and responses on higher priority patients. If the ambulance service requires the firefighters to drive their vehicle, they should provide complete coverage for the firefighters driving in the same way they provide coverage for their own employees. Also, since driving an ambulance is not considered patient care, it should be considered a request for service. A request for service can and should be invoiced back to the BCAS if requesting firefighters to drive. It is recommended that Council pursue this option with the BCEHS through the appropriate avenues. The PRFR should consider responding only to purple calls, which will ensure that both BCAS and firefighters continue to the most critical events. This would also mean that the firefighters would not attend non-critical incidents in order to help preserve our fire rescue response in the community. The PRFR has been working with Provincial MLA Jennifer Rice on this situation and will continue to do so, and are grateful for the support. This evening, the Prince Rupert Fire Rescue is looking for support of Council that the PRFR respond to BC Ambulance purple calls only, and that Council seek coverage and compensation from BCAS if firefighters are to continue to drive the ambulance.
Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Rendau. So recommendation that stands right now, just for context sake, was that the Council supports the Prince Rupert Fire Rescue to respond to Beasley Ambulance service purple calls only, and that council seek coverage and compensation from BCAS if firefighters are continue to drive the ambulance. Okay, perfect. So we've got our mover and seconder. Yeah. So I just a couple notes on this. Like, again, the main focus. I know there were some dollar figures that were mentioned as well. A lot of this is really due to safety of the community, because when we take a firefighter off duty, we now have a limited we have a huge barrier to entry to actually enter buildings, because they need an appropriate amount of firefighters on shift and available on watch to be able to effectively respond. If they're tied up with other calls and different things like that, or having to literally leave the fire truck to go and drive the ambulance for the BCAS, it puts us in a really tough spot. So for us, just for context for folks at home, this is not to seek a dollar figure. This is around community safety, and then the coverage for our firefighters and our team members that are going and responding under the service of another vehicle. Any discussion from members of council? Councillor Niche?
I've often felt that it's been a burden on our taxpayers when we're watching our firefighters, who are paid for by local taxpayers, responding to minor calls that really, in my eyes, should be covered from the ambulance service. I think this is a way of obviously, our firefighters will still respond to the purple calls, being the most important calls, the ones where people's lives are at stake. But I do feel that the ambulance service needs to step up, and they need to hire more people to take care of the job that they are supposed to take care of. I don't want to see our firefighters burn out from doing someone else's job. I think that they should be tasked first with doing their own job, and being there as a backup to help. But many times when I've seen situations around town, and I see firefighters are the first ones there, and they're the ones doing the majority of the work, and now they're driving the ambulance for them, and they don't want to pay us back for it, and we are having to backfill our fire hall to make up for the loss of someone because they're driving an ambulance, and I this really bothers me. I feel that this is a good step to maybe bringing that to a stop, and hopefully they can step up and provide the service that they are supposed to provide.
Madam Corporate Administrator, Councillor Adie, and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you. Just to clarify, this is about community safety. There is a requirement, the fire service has a requirement for a number of staff prior to making entry for a fire. And if those staff are being called out to drive for an ambulance for a non-critical call, it makes it more and more difficult to ensure that they have the staff available should a fire arise. So this is more about community safety and attending to that rather than the financial aspect.
Thank you. Councillor Adie?
Yeah, I echo what Councillor Niche is saying, and recognize that it's a little disturbing to discover that there have been times when there's not been an ambulance available. I think we all live with a certain amount of peace in mind, assuming that certain services are going to be available when we need them. So it is a rather disturbing issue to be dealing with. And so I would strongly encourage, support the motion, first of all, and I encourage any efforts made to remedy the shortages at the institutional level with the BCAS as well. I do want to just make a point that in criticizing the BCAS service levels, we shouldn't necessarily allow that to be interpreted as criticizing the paramedics on the ground, who are also overburdened with the work that they do as well. So I do want to recognize that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Adie. Councillor Cunningham?
Councillor Adie sort of mirrored what I was going to say, and I totally agree with what Councillor Lee said. You know, our firefighters are trained up. Entry level requires X number, I think it's 4 firefighters to be on scene. If they don't have 4, you know they're not going to stand outside and hear somebody screaming inside a house. They're going to take a chance and go in there without the right personnel there, and that's our firefighters to a T. You know, they're not going to stand by, and they're just putting themselves at harm by doing somebody else's job, and EMS has to step up to the plate. I know they have staffing problems and that, but you know, I don't think it's a municipality problem when it's a provincial service. They keep downloading this stuff to municipalities, and I just think it's something we've got to address, whether we send a letter to the Minister of Health and, let them know that we don't particularly like having our firefighters tied up on calls that don't necessarily require their expertise, and also put the rest of our citizens in town in harm's way because they can't get to a fire in time or that.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Yeah, just to kind of bring that all together, I think there are a lot of good points have been made around these pieces. And yeah, and again, with Councillor Eadie's point around understanding that the paramedics on the ground are not, that criticism is not directed towards them. That's more so towards the senior management and the agency itself, because a lot of those folks are quite burnt out. I've got a couple friends on the paramedic service, and they are quite exhausted as well. So seeing these pieces and some of these pieces, and I think there's an advocacy role we can play here on voicing a lot of these concerns. And I think the recommendation as stands is what we need. So I will call that to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Item 4Q, report from the Corporate Administrator regarding Prince Rupert Golf Club request for support. Madam Corporate Administrator, you have the floor once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Prince Rupert Golf Club has received funding from the Port of Prince Rupert's Community Investment Fund and requires matching funds in order to have the money released. They are applying for presently a $250,000 BC Gaming Capital Grant. The application to BC Gaming Fund is for one green renovation and the tee box and bunker restoration activities, which is the first phase of a larger project, which will eventually include 3 more green renovations and the restoration to the cart paths. The club is seeking that council provide a letter of support for the Prince Rupert Golf Club for their application to the BC Gaming Capital Grant in support of the revitalization and accessibility project, expecting the Prince Rupert Golf Club to operate this course at this site for the next 10 years.
Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Eadie. Discussion? Councillor Eadie?
I just would like the golf club to commit to making the greens easier for me to putt.
Because we're all sure that's what's affecting your game, Councillor Eadie. Any further discussion from members of council? We'll call this to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Right. On to bylaws. Item one of our favorite topics tonight. Item 5A, report from the Madam Chief Financial Officer regarding 2022 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3498 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under the community charter, a municipality must adopt a 5-year financial plan annually. A financial plan may also be amended by bylaw at any time. Council gave 3 readings to the amendment bylaw number 3498 2022 on June 27th. To recap the purpose of the amendment bylaw, $175,000 is proposed to conduct repairs to the Digby Island ferry ramp to be funded from capital reserves. And finally, $1 million is proposed to repair and rehab the failed section on McBride Street caused by a water main leak. The works include the full replacement of the water and sewer line up to the intersection at 5th Avenue. This emergency repair is to be funded through sewer surplus in the amount of $150,000 and short-term borrowing over 5 years in the amount of $850,000 with respect to the water utility to be repaid through dividends from Prince Rupert Legacy Inc. The amendments proposed were placed on the city's website and notice board June 22nd, 2022, prior to the bylaw being heard by council on June 27th, along with contact information for questions and feedback. The public has continued to be provided the opportunity to comment since that time, and as of this meeting, there have been no comments received with respect to this proposed amendment. Council is asked to consider the public consultation process sufficient, with which a decision to adopt the 2022 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw can be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chief Financial Officer. So recommendation as it stands that council consider the public consultation process to date, comprising of the posting of notice on the city's website and on the notice of board at City Hall since June 22nd, 2022, and inviting feedback on the amendment bylaw. Sufficient for the purpose of consultation under Section 166 of the Community Charter, and that council give fourth and final reading to the 2022 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3498 2022. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Adie. Discussion? Call to question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, on to 5B, report from the communications manager regarding public notice bylaw number 3500-2022 and development procedures amendment bylaw number 3501-2022. Welcome.
Thank you. So as you mentioned, this report is with respect to a proposed public notice bylaw. So city staff have been encountering challenges to proceed with bylaw and other regulatory consideration processes efficiently due to the limitations within section 94.1, which is the default public notification requirements of the community charter, which specifies 2-week notification in the local newspaper, which is challenging because of the local newspaper's current deadline schema, which requires you to submit your advertisement a week in advance, and then it can be published. And so within those 2 weeks that we have between council meetings, if we're looking to schedule something like a public hearing, we aren't able to do that within that time period effectively. So what the province has now enabled us to do, because of the fact that many municipalities have been encountering this issue, is they allow you to adopt your own local public notice bylaw that gives the community greater surety and understanding of where they can receive public notification information. So this public notice bylaw would be a local alternative means of publication method for Prince Rupert that would provide the community surety around where they can look to find local government notices. So the methods that we're proposing in the public notice bylaw that's attached to this RTC are the primary methods being the city's website and also our social media platform, and then publishing once as well in the local newspaper. So we'd be still retaining the local newspaper so that we're reaching people that are not necessarily as literate with online methods, but also making sure that people know that they can find it for the 2-week minimum on our website and social media platforms. And the reason that those were selected is because currently both are free, and we use them quite frequently currently, and people interface with us quite a lot through those means of communication. So that was the rationale for staff selecting those methods. We'd also like to note that given that local elections are occurring in October of 2022, we will still continue to use the newspaper for those notification methods. So we're not going to apply this different standard if you adopt the bylaw to the election, because we want people to know that things are going to proceed as usual. All election notices for the notice of nomination period, notice of election, things like that will proceed within those 2-week notification processes and the way that they have in years past. And then the other recommendation is with respect to our development procedure bylaw. And essentially that's just kind of a procedural process. So we've recommended to update this development procedure bylaw to mirror any kind of public notice bylaw that you may adopt today. So that would be dependent on you accepting the initial recommendation. So in conclusion, the recommendation is to receive the report for information purposes, and also that council consider first, second, and third readings to the proposed public notice bylaw number 3500-2022 in attachment 1, as is permitted under section 94.2 of the community charter, and direct the bylaw to public notification for community feedback on it before it's finally considered. And also that council give first and second readings to the proposed development procedure amendment bylaw number 3501-2022, which is in attachment 2, which proposes to update section 3.5 of the development procedure bylaw number 3469. And we also saw the opportunity, because city branding has changed, as you know, and the forms in this development procedure bylaw were outdated. So all that we did was amend the forms that were proposed to be changed according to city branding. So those are also appended as well, just as a procedural update. And then we would also direct that amendment as well to public notification. And I'm open to questions if you have any.
Councillor Niche?
Just make sure I got that right. So you would still put it in the newspaper, but it'll only be the one time versus having it in there twice. So it'll still be in there.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, recommendation that stands is that council consider first, second, and third readings of public notice bylaw number 3500-2022, and that council direct the bylaw to public notification for community feedback, and that council give first and second readings to the proposed development procedures amendment bylaw number 3501-2022. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Adie.
Mr. Chair, I think that you have to do these separately. do the two bylaws separately? The first, second readings for bylaw 3500, and then
Sure thing. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, just as it reads, there are very large capital letters for
Yes.
ands to signify one motion. But I will accept as recommended for correction. So we'll go with the first recommendation. We'll redo that. So recommendation that council consider first, second, and third readings to public notice bylaw number 350/2022, and we're going to turn that comma into a period, and we're going to end that motion there. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion is carried. So item B-1, we've got a recommendation that council give first and second readings to the proposed development procedures amendment bylaw number 3501/2022. Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor Cunningham. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you very much.
First, second readings to road dedication bylaw number 3499/2022. Reason for the report is that Digby Towers is preparing for occupancy and their building requires the appropriate parking. The owner requested to purchase the linear parcel across from Prince Rupert Boulevard. We've brought that forward to council, and in order to secure and make sure that the access to the neighboring property is maintained, we need to do a road dedication bylaw in that parcel to maintain that access to the neighboring property. This bylaw will do that, so we're looking for first and second readings tonight, and then we can send it off for public notification and to Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Recommendation that stands right now is that council give first and second readings to the Prince Rupert Boulevard Road Dedication Bylaw number 3499/2022. Moved by Councillor Adie, second by Councillor Randall. Discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Right. Reports, question, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Adie?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, reflecting on the fact that the city is currently seeking input from the public on transportation planning, and I recall that there was a second area in which the city was going to look for input, and that's Parks and Recreation. And I know that there are at least two groups that are awaiting that opportunity, and we'll have some input. So I'm just wondering where we are with the timing of that.
Yeah, I can just speak to that quickly. So we do have a consultant. We're working with Urban Systems, and that allows us to coordinate with the transportation and asset management plan that we're currently working on. The process started a bit later than the transportation, so right now the consultants are coming up for a day of learning and taking a tour of our parks this week, and then after that we'll be within the next couple of weeks, I believe, we'll be putting out some social media posts and starting engagement at that time.
Okay, thanks. And my second question might be something people are wondering about. Is how are we doing with McBride Street? Is there an end in sight?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there is an end in sight. So we are likely about 3 weeks away from pavement, and then we are at the mercy of the paving company. We are just finishing up in the intersection of 3rd and McBride. We will be moving up to do the intersection of 5th and McBride, but I think we can open up 4th and McBride very soon so that we can get some traffic moving forward through there on the gravel spot. But we're looking at between 2 and 3 weeks. I'm saying 3 weeks just because we want to make sure that we don't underestimate that. So, and just for paving, because that may be another question, is that the paving contractors are looking to start our paving program just after the long weekend. Thank you.
Correct. Councillor Cunningham.
Now that we're onto the transportation, one thing that's been brought up to me by several residents of Cedar Village is at one time there was discussion about a bus stop there, and they actually, when they paved the road and put the sidewalk in, they did a pull-out for buses, and it's never been done, and quite a few of them have mobility problems, and they've got to walk all the way up to Fifth Avenue East to catch a bus. And they've wondered if and when they could get a bus service or a bus that could swing down that way on the way. So I'm hopefully going to the transportation meeting tomorrow night, and I'm going to bring that up. But I think it's something the city should talk to BC Transit about, getting a bus service for them.
Any other discussion from members of council? Councillor Niche.
May as well make it a little longer. My question is, when is the demolition of the Jehovah Witness Hall starting?
Should be starting this week.
Perfect. I just had a couple of people asking.
Okay, so I guess for me, before we wrap up, I just wanted to touch on kind of some events happening nationally right now that could affect a lot of our residents. So we have Pope Francis here in Canada that had made an apology for the Catholic Church and the church infrastructure's involvement in the Indian residential schools as well as the day schools. So for those of you at home that are having some challenges and some feelings coming up and different things like that, I'll just provide the National Indian Residential School crisis line number. That number is 1-866-925-4419. So I'll just do it one more time for folks at home. It's 1-866-925-4419. This is a 24-hour line, and it is toll-free. And it's provided for all members that have found themselves affected by this. And I know that there's a lot of feelings and different kinds of pieces that cause a lot of division and mixed feelings for a lot of different folks, myself included, being a second generation from a survivor. Looking at these pieces and how this affects us as a community, and just to watch out for each other and finding that these pieces are extremely important, and it just takes a small act of kindness and compassion. So you see folks that are, especially those struggling on the streets and different things like that, one small act of kindness can go a long way. So just before we wrap up, I just wanted to close on that note. So again, thank you all for this vibrant discussion on our tectonic plate moving issues between parking and bylaws and all of these other things. And so I guess we'll put forward a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Cunningham. No seconder. We're going to keep it going. Councillor Randall, meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.